Once again, we open the grimoire. Wait a second. No, that's not right. Once again, it's January, and we're talking about John Carpenter, and it's Thursday night, and everybody's gathered around Twitch, every single one of you on the internet, to watch the show only simply known as... Hey, you see this one?
The year is 2024, and two friends once again invite you to join them in revisiting or discovering for the first time the masterworks of a filmmaker who transcends genre, whose horrors have lurked in the dark, broken free from the ice, crawled straight from hell, or even pulled themselves from the very pits of a mad mind, who showed us the hidden corners of Chinatown, sent a man from the stars, and dragged us to New York, LA, and even Mars. Nearly unmatched as a genre filmmaker. Once again, Hey, Did You See This One? Invites you to look upon the works of a genius. We present to you Jan Carpenter's In the Month of Madness.
It's that time of the month again. It's time of the year. It's the time of the year. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, it's Jan Carpenter's In the Month of Madness, week 3. We're doing it. This week we're talking about Assault on Precinct 13. And our guest this week is friend of the show, fan of the show, former guest of the show, Tim Covey. Welcome back, Tim.
Thank you for having me back.
It looked like you needed to read his name off the cue card there for a second. Tim Covey.
No, it's kind of a heavy lift to look at the buttons.
Yeah. I joke. I know you know Tim's name.
Yes, I know his name.
The three of us saw a movie together recently. A movie that we may or may not discuss in the future.
We will probably talk about it in the future. We'll probably have him on to talk about that movie in April.
Ooh. Spoiler alert. No, let's not spoiler it. Let's just leave it unspoilered.
It's a huge spoiler.
It's such a spoiler.
I'm just getting the sound levels right here because I sound kind of quiet. Maybe I'm not talking into the microphone.
You sound pretty good to me.
Okay.
I can hear you.
All right, cool. Okay, well, this is a show. It's a weekly movie show where we react and review a different movie each and every week. Like I said, it is Jan Carpenter's In the Month of Madness, the month where we talk about John Carpenter. This is the third year running, I believe. We are running out of movies, which is great because once
I think we've got a year and a half left.
Yeah. And then we'll have to come up with some sort of new thing. But in the meantime, we are talking about Assault on Precinct 13. This is a fantastic film, but before we get to that, I just want to talk about something that we do each and every week, and that is I'll put up an image from the movie poster, and I'll have people online guess it. This is a fan guessing game.
Congratulations! You have successfully guessed the correct answer, which is the answer you provided. Congratulations!
Congratulations! So I actually kind of dropped the ball this week because I had to be on another podcast yesterday. I was on the Hold Up, a movie podcast yesterday. So it slipped my mind on Monday to put this up. I'm kind of a day behind all week. I also have Super Kick tomorrow night. It's a hectic week. But I did get two valuable, brand new submissions. One from Jimmy Vandelay, a friend of mine who used to do reffing. He's a local ref.
Jimmy Vandelay of Vandelay Industries?
Of Vandelay Industries. Something tells me that's not his real last name. I also know him as Jimmy Sketches on Instagram.
Jimmy Sketches of Sketches Industry?
But he got it right, and he just wanted to say, be excellent to each other, station. And then he mentioned that John Carpenter is one of his top 3 directors of all time. I believe he said the other 2 were Kurosawa and Steven Spielberg's. So thank you, Jim. Also, Brody Trottier. Steve, I believe you know this man.
Who?
Brody from the escape rooms, I think.
Oh.
Do you remember that guy?
I don't know.
He worked at the Tower, I think. Brody, if you're listening to this and I have that wrong, I'm sorry. I
also didn't work at the Tower really that much, so I didn't get to know everybody that well. I know you worked there pretty often, so.
Yeah, I lived across the street, so I was station 13 there for quite some time.
Or station from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Exactly.
To each other.
He says, I was like, a lot of these people are caught off guard, even though I'm like, you'll get a shout out or a plug, and everybody's like, what?
A what? What does that mean?
What does that mean?
You calling me a plug?
You're gonna get a plug in the mail.
Yeah, I'm gonna send him a.
You know, a lot of people don't know that term. Like when I call someone a plug around people I'm not familiar with, all that, they're like, "What do you mean by that?" I'm like, "I don't know. I just mean like a doofus, I guess."
That's from your childhood, though, because I know a plug is like a drug dealer.
Yeah, a plug is like a butt plug. Like you're like you're just like you're a clog of information.
That's great. I want to use it that way from now on. But Brody said, I guess just a shout out to my girlfriend, Vanessa. Shout out to my amazing girlfriend, Vanessa. There's nothing better than watching old Siskel and Ebert reviews on YouTube with you. So thank you.
That's nice.
Thank you.
And I learned that you can go watch Siskel and Ebert old reviews on YouTube.
You can. You can watch almost anything on YouTube if you search hard enough and long enough.
You have the
change your VPN to Russia and you can find almost anything.
Yes, it's true. That's how we were going to do Cocoon for the show. We almost had to go to Russian Facebook.
Yeah.
Which is even crazier.
Cocoon. Very hard movie to find. Even if you're pirating it, it's like impossible to find that movie.
Like it's not even a situation where there's just no seeds and leechers. It's just not there.
It just doesn't exist. Yeah.
Because I don't think it ever got. It
was on Netflix once, like 15 years ago, for maybe 5 minutes. Not even enough time for you to watch the whole movie, the whole runtime.
You just see the lemon party.
Suspiciously weird.
Yeah, we were trying to do it on our Alien Abduction month, but we couldn't find it anywhere. So we're just like, Mars Attacks, or I can't remember what we changed it to. But we changed it to something else.
Well, no, we had to sit through the fucking Fourth Kind.
Oh right, yeah. I see. I've already washed my brain of that experience because it was so bad.
Great episode of.
I was wondering why you guys just didn't do something like Cocoon instead of that movie. But anyway.
Yeah, great episode of this show because me and Steven, a friend of the show, Jared, ripped it to shreds. Mm-hmm. But it's a rare time where we actually get a movie that we're just like, I can't believe we had to sit through this. Speaking of, this is not that. This is a much better film than that. Before we get to that, I just want to give a shout out to John Carpenter, the man himself, who had a birthday a couple days ago. I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, if it was, hey, it's John Carpenter's birthday month, let's do this special month, or if we just mentioned it. I
think what happened was we were trying to choose a month, and I suggested that we do all John Carpenter months because he has such a, plethora of different genres that we could play around with, and it would be fun to sort of examine them from different, not have to do like one theme, rather just take a person and be able to do different themes and see how they play around with it. And then we looked up, or I think I might have looked up like John Carpenter and was like, hey, his birthday is also this month. Let's call it Jan Carpenter month.
It's perfect. So happy birthday, John Carpenter. You'll probably see.
Happy birthday, John.
You'll see this eventually, I hope.
Can you and Kurt Russell just get back together and make another Escape and or Big Trouble movie, for God's sake, please?
Yeah, just make it like
something awesome.
Make it like the newest indie where he's got some sidekick that does most of the heavy lifting, but Kurt Russell's just there like, I'm Snake Plissken.
There were a few
no computers.
There were a few directors in the early 2000s that got really into video games, and they started making video games, and they made a The Thing video game, and I think he was pretty involved in the making of that. I also know that he loves playing video games, but Clive Barker also got into it. I think he developed one game. I can't remember what it was called. It was Clive Barker something, but it was very similar to like Doom or something like that.
Yeah. I'll have to look all that up, but yeah, you're right.
And even if he came back and made a video game, like imagine
that would still be awesome.
I mean, I guess the Metal Gear games are basically just continuations of the Escape series.
He joined the military and like for real, and then became a spy. Just before we get to our brief history, basically another thing I want to do is once again shout out to White Bat Audio, the song that we've been using for that intro that Steve is using. It's great. It has such a cool like build up while he's talking, and then the drop when he's showing the clips, and then into our logos. Like it's just so well done. It's perfect for this month, and I'm sad that we didn't get to use it previously.
It also feels like John Carpenter music, which is really good. Yeah, which is why I chose it.
And just one more thing on that note: social media. Go find us. Hey, did you see this one on all platforms? Give us a like, follow, and a share. We really appreciate everybody who has come along on this ride with us so far. This was a pretty big milestone week. Every episode you can now find in video format up till now, in audio format up till now, on Apple, on Spotify, even on YouTube has the audio versions. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the year, because instead of me spending all this time going back and working on an on-demand catalog, I can start doing new shit, baby. I've already started putting up shorts and TikToks. I took a week off from that because it's kind of a tedious process, but if I have other things to worry about, but look for those coming down the pike. I want to take specifically, Tim, your episode where we talk about Castaway, because there's so much gold in that episode, and Steve does the best one noise Tom Hanks impression that I want to make lots of clips out of. So thank you, everyone, and let's talk about this movie. So, of course, the same thing we like to do each and every week is talk about our
A Brief History.
I can't hear the sound effects. Is that an issue?
Neither can I.
Hear the sound effects.
I was wondering if that was just me and my new audio setup.
Oh shit! Let me just.
But I did hear the audio for the Jan Carpenter, which means it should on Twitch. I didn't hear it on Zoom, so it's working on Twitch. So we don't have to worry about it that much.
Yeah.
Did you hear the music when you came in?
I did not,
but I didn't have Twitch open yet.
Here, let me just double check something here. Everybody.
Just make a fart noise, and I'll tell you if it works on Twitch.
Yes, please do.
Yeah.
There we go.
That? Okay.
Yes.
It doesn't matter, like it's only like the internet can hear it. It's just better if you.
Well, the farts do matter, but
yeah.
The well-timed fart is always great. Hey, check! I found this fart. Sorry, I ruined it.
I like the dry one better.
All right, guys, here you go.
A Brief History.
Anyway.
Back on track. If I ever decide to edit this, that'll be a good edit point. But it is a tradition around these parts, which I totally ripped off from Hot Ones. I'm still working on it. What did I write down to change that? Around here,
we make the guests go first.
Around here, it's a time-honored tradition to give the guests the first opportunity to give their brief history. That's you, Tim.
Well, My brief history is actually, for a change on this show, extremely brief. I watched this once as a teenager and completely forgot about it. I just knew it existed, and then skipped out on the remake, and then watched it today. And it was very refreshing and very interesting to examine again. But I don't have much else to say as far as my history goes, outside of been a John Carpenter fan for a super long time. So it was cool to re-examine it this way.
Excellent.
And kind of see the talent when it was raw before a lot of refinement took hold.
Cool.
And that's it. There we go.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I think you might have a bit more of a history with this one, because I brought it up and you had talked about how it's like his first film, right? Like his first actual.
It's one of his first films. Yeah, I don't know if it's his very first. No, Dark Star.
His first real credit is Dark Star.
Yeah, but yeah, it's Dark Star was also technically a student film.
Yeah,
which he somehow got funded and he made, but into a feature length, and I think he got distributed.
Yeah,
but yeah, my history is actually not that long either. It's I watched it when I was younger, and then the remake came out. I actually didn't realize that this movie existed until the remake came out, and I had then someone informed me like, oh, this is a remake of a John Carpenter movie, and I didn't know who John Carpenter was at the time. And then they listed off all of his credits, and I was like, Big Trouble in Little what?
Big Who and Little Where?
Who Christine's a car? Wait, what? So I didn't watch this movie from beginning to end until quite a bit later, after I had started going through and kind of examining all of his movies under a microscope, after I had finished school and stuff like that. And yeah, it's not really at the top of my list in terms of John Carpenter movies, but I don't dislike it. It has more in common with a zombie movie than it does with any of his other movies, I guess I would say.
For very important reasons, yeah.
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 But yeah, my brief history is I saw it a couple of times after finding out who John Carpenter was, and I didn't spend as much time dissecting this one as I have with many of his other movies. But watching it this week, I think there's enough. There's a lot to say about it, but we'll get into that when we start talking about the body.
Absolutely. That's great. I remember hearing about this movie. I remember the sequel came out in like 2000, or the remake came out in like 2007. It's a Ethan Hawke movie, right? Or no, it's got
I never
Ethan
saw
Hawke
it.
and Lawrence Fishburne.
In Lawrence Fishburne. Is it do you know if it's like a kind of a shot for shot remake, or is it like they took the idea of a siege thriller and just
When it came out, I was very anti remake, and like after what they did with like the pseudo prequel to The Thing and all that kind of stuff, like in that era, I had like a big adverse opinion about remakes. That like a remake only makes sense if the original was bad.
right?
That like you need to take a second walk at this because you made mistakes the first time, kind of thing. That makes more sense to me. So I didn't really see a point in redoing that. It's just like you're doing it again with more expensive cameras, but to be honest, I do appreciate Lawrence Fishburne. I do appreciate Ethan Hawke, and after watching this again, my curiosity is piqued. So I may check it out eventually.
I was thinking the same thing.
But I don't know if it's like shot for shot or what.
Yeah, I watched it today again, just briefly while I was doing some stuff, and I kept thinking, like, accidentally in my head, being like, they could probably make a pretty good remake out of this. And then I was like, oh wait, they did, and I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it. It exists, Steven. Stop. My curiosity has also been piqued by just the fact that like the movie does seem like it kind of suffers from low budget syndrome, where there could be a lot more going on and you could get a little bit more. But the things that I don't want from a remake of this is like, I don't want to know more about the gang that's coming in. I like the fact that they're sort of this weird cult that is like voiceless and scary because you don't know anything about them. The more you learn about them, the more they become human, and the less frightening the scenario is, right? The only thing you know about them is that they're out for revenge of some kind.
Some kind.
And that's cool. And Anyway, we'll
Yeah.
talk again. We'll talk
I
about this
just,
more as we go.
I mean, my history is just as brief as Tim's. I watched it yesterday, and in my head the whole time had this and Dark Star mixed up. I thought this was the one that you said was essentially a student film, and I was going, no, this is a what?
This is a movie.
This is a real movie. They just don't show the climax. They don't show the explosion that they build a whole fucking 10-minute scene towards. But we'll get to all of that and more when we talk.
It was a very low budget movie. It has the same budget as Halloween, I believe, $100,000, which is nothing.
Yeah, it was just $100K for it.
And I did some digging today, and I could not find the box office for this movie.
Well, I'm gonna play the director Sting, and we'll talk a little bit about that stuff.
Okay. All right. Quiet on set. Are we rolling? Okay, let's shoot this piece of shit. Sound. Speed. Action!
Tim, you're the only guest that laughs at that every time you hear it. Everyone else is just like, what is this?
It's just the fact that it's censored makes me laugh.
That's so funny to me. Of course, we are talking.
A well-timed beep is really hard to pull off.
For the longest time, I said South Park is better with the beeping because it's so much more shocking. We are, of course, talking about John Carpenter. We have our outro, which is a love letter to John Carpenter, which explains a lot. We've talked about him. We talked to him about length during The Fog. We even went into him a little bit as far as the movie Christine goes last week. Is there anything you want to add to the conversation about John Carpenter, Tim? And do you guys have information on, I believe you were about to look into the box office. Any notes about his direction for this, or any notes about production for this film?
I think one thing that I've always appreciated about his filming that was actually encapsulated in a quote that he has about this movie for his filmmaking philosophy for low budget, but I think this kind of bleeds into his big budget, quote unquote, big budget stuff as well, where he said for his philosophy for low budget was as little footage as possible and extended scenes. And you think about stuff like They Live and Big Trouble in Little China, anything that's establishing, anything that is showing the atmosphere, you're given just enough information to get, where you are, when you are, and what is happening as far as who's going where. And more importantly is what's going on in the scenes. And you're being informed more so by the dialogue and interactions and actions of people. And there's something I do appreciate about that, where there's something, the bolts are all tightened with that, in that kind of mechanics for filmmaking, in my opinion, where you can see that function at play. And I think it's very visible in this movie. There's definitely a certain cinematic language that John Carpenter still had to develop for himself, but that could also be a part of constraints of filming this, that it's one of his first real commercial movies, and doing it for just $100,000 and practical filming all done in 20 days, something like that. You don't really hear about these days unless it's done on somebody's camera phone.
And something I noticed about that too, there's a shot at the very beginning of the movie. We'll talk about the actual shot itself, but when we get into the body, but the thing that I like about it is you don't see a shaky cam very much back in this era. Over the shoulder,
the handheld at the beginning.
That was really cool. And that was it's just a testament to his ability to break the mold, and he's been doing it since the beginning. I know Dark Star is lauded as sort of a student film that got put in some theaters or whatever. But I'm really excited to watch that next year, or sooner than that.
You can watch it before that.
Watch it whenever I want.
You don't have to wait.
I can't watch the Grimoire episodes. I can't watch any movies we're gonna do later until the week of. No, but yeah, that's some good stuff.
So a little bit about what his vision was for this movie, I guess, is that he wanted to make it sort of a classic Hollywood style Western. Similar to The Alamo or I think even what was it? It was called the Anderson
Alamo.
Alamo. Yeah, the Anderson Alamo was the original title of this script. And so he envisioned it being sort of like an El Dorado or
Yeah, the
one
Rio
of one of
Grande.
those. Yeah, yeah, exactly. One of those movies where a bunch of cowboys are stuck in a saloon and they have to shoot their way out of the town to get through a posse or something.
Pardon me, Rio Bravo.
Rio Bravo, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I think he basically pulled that off. It does feel like that kind of movie, without sort of the bells and whistles of a golden era Hollywood screen where they spend like $1 billion on sets and like make like an entire backlot village or whatever. It's just shot in a really, really shitty building. It's the ugliest police station I've ever seen.
It looked like a sitcom set at a couple of times, or like what a sitcom set tries to emulate. Like if you look at old Taxi episodes, like it looks something like that.
I thought about Taxi as well because of his the music when the not like main theme, but when like the woman gets killed and it was playing kind of like a Taxi kind of a sitcom kind of a music.
There's a few. It's like that electric organ sort of like.
Yeah.
It's like Carpenter, but not. You're like it's like a softer, nicer Carpenter, not an aggressive, blaring, blinking green and red lights. Carpenter.
Joan Carpenter.
But I think that he also wanted the movie to be called the Anderson Alamo, but the distributor fucked it up, and they're like, we're calling it District 13 because
which is a bit of a misnomer.
No, it's
it's called District. It's District 9.
It's Precinct 9.
It's Division 13 of District 9.
It's also it also says Division 14 on the building.
Yeah, so much going on here. It's just like, no one cares.
So it's literally they wanted to make a spooky title.
Yeah, they're like, what's the scariest number?
Assault
7?
on
No.
Precinct 666 from hell, the devil, Satan.
Assault on Precinct 666. No, that they made that movie. It's called The Prince of Darkness.
Yeah. This movie reminds me of The Prince of Darkness a lot, and
it has a lot of the same sort of beats, and the end is more or less the same, where a building is being assaulted by a bunch of monster people.
Yeah,
and it's up to an axe-wielding priest and a diverse cast of individuals.
So I think that's enough for the director this week. We gotta, of course, pace ourselves. We'll do a big blowout next week and cover some other stuff, but I think that was good. So what do you say we get right into the shit?
Oh my god.
Let's get right into the shit.
That sounds like a lot to deal with.
The body of the episode.
I played that again for you because last week you're like, I don't even remember making that.
Because we always play the sexy one.
I like the disco one.
The one where the body of the episode is like slowly and seductively walking in a room. Yeah.
So this is
look at that body on that episode.
Yeah. Look at that. So this is Assault on Precinct 13. This is a film about essentially a police officer who gets stationed at this precinct that's about to be basically dismantled. And everybody sees it as that. The people working there are like, fuck this place, we're out. But what ends up happening is a man and his daughter are out getting ice cream, and there's this roving gang of hooligans who's just assaulting people, just killing for no reason other than
it's the real sport. Assault on Precinct 13. And I actually really like the.
I was just gonna finish the quick synopsis. She gets shot. He makes it out alive, and they start stalking him. He makes it into this precinct. And then they start attacking the place relentlessly for an hour. So that's pretty much the movie.
Yep.
See you next week.
Yeah, an alternative title that John Carpenter had for this movie was The Siege, which also makes sense. But this is also kind of a genre of movie now. There's like a subcategory within action that is the siege film, and all those cowboy westerns. This movie, the Raid, Dread,
yeah. TV shows have used this model over and over and over again for sure.
It's good though, and I kind of like it. Like I like like locking people up in one location. All the Dawn of the Dead movies, the Night of the Living Dead movies, it's all the same thing where people are you're band together with an unlikely cast of characters, people who don't know each other. How are they going to react? Who do you trust? And and how do you get out of it together?
Film specifically, because it's through the eyes of John Carpenter, he definitely genre bends in this. I believe this kind of movie outside of the Western doing it hadn't really been done yet. And what I love is I was reading stuff about it later and realizing that it was one of those, like, you know, cowboys in a saloon, they got to shoot their way out because they're surrounded. But what I really love about it is it's almost like a zombie movie. It feels a lot like you said, Steve, like the one where they're in the mall. I think that's
Dawn of the Dead.
Dawn of the Dead.
Well, Night of the Living Dead, which is I guess original, is the same deal where they're locked in a house, right? And it's Dawn of the Dead. They just kind of up the ante. Sorry, go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say, quite literally, this is taking notes from both Rio Bravo and Night of the Living Dead, but in exploitation form, where Carpenter and Kaufman and what's the other producer name? It's CKK was their production company for this movie. And so the three of them wanted to make an exploitation movie, and John Carpenter had put together this script for it's Western-inspired thing, but approaching the same concept as Night of the Living Dead, but in exploitation form. Mm-hmm. And so the agreement was, okay, we'll stick with this, but and you get full control, but the compromise is you have to keep it at under 100,000 for the budget, and then they went away from there.
And it's like, okay, so we'll film it all at nighttime.
Yeah, in very select locations, and
not get enough
very
lighting
efficiently
power
done
to light parking lots. We'll use the natural light from the parking lot.
That's one thing about the look of this movie is that it's not spectacularly lit all the time, but it still works, and it does have that gritty feel that, like, you're like in the beginning when you're talking about that
in the beginning.
The first, like, handheld camera shot behind the gang members before they get shot by the police overhead. The lighting for that is actually, like, really, really good, but you can tell it's also natural.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I'm gonna still do the plot. I'm gonna be a little bit more paraphrasy with it because there isn't a whole lot. But in this sequence, I don't know. I couldn't figure out what this was meant to represent, and could this be the revenge in the first place that they were these people trying
I think they were part of the people that were stealing the crates of weaponry. So the whole conceit of the movie is that this gang of people who they're called the Cholos, I believe is what they're called. And
and Thunder something as well.
Thunderstruck.
Yeah.
They just play.
The Thunderstruck.
They're blasting
Trollo.
AC/DC when they assault the precinct.
But they couldn't afford to get that song, so we just got dun 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 dun.
We just got John Carpenter pressing one key on a synthesizer every time we see them. I did really like that every time you see the gang before the assault happens, it's just one singular note just piercing your ears the entire time, like making you feel uncomfortable. I think that's
a great way to build tension.
Yeah, the beginning was really good. I actually really enjoyed all these different plot threads and how, it's been so long since I've seen it that I kind of had forgotten how they all link together. I knew that there was one big moment that links them all together, but I couldn't remember how the rest work out. And it's not necessarily like, oh, it all wraps up in a nice, neat little package. It's just kind of like, oh, it makes sense. Like that these people are in this area that is overrun by these people who are bad, and they all have guns, and they are looking to reap chaos on their neighborhood. It's why the precinct is moving. Even I think like they're like, this neighborhood is so fucked
because all the
buildings can't even have a police station.
All the buildings were condemned. It's like,
yeah,
it's become this hotbed for this gang of just murderers. We get that scene like right after this too, where they're just sitting. The four main guys are sitting around, just like cutting their arm and bleeding into like a bowl, which isn't really explained until later. They just throw blood down where they mark places. I think
it's the blood oath.
Yeah, it's like some sort of weird cultish behavior, right? I think that it's more so meant to just kind of show us that these aren't regular people. That it's not a regular gang who's like, we need to get money and power, and then we'll get the women or whatever. It's like, no, let's all bleed into the blood bowl, boys. Come on, slit your arms open.
Yeah,
It's
like
no, they're crazy.
no
They're crazy
dialogue.
people.
Yeah.
They're not talking. They just say cholo back and forth to each other.
Cholo, cholo, cholo.
And the parts with them running through the parking lot made me think of like a Civil War reenactment or LARPers or something kind of funny for a moment. But there is like this, much like Night of the Living Dead, there's a nearing supernatural element to them where they're unearthly and they're very inhumane.
Yeah.
And just brutal. And yeah, and so the police raid on those guys at the beginning sets off the four warlords to do their just roaming revenge streak. I think and just roaming the streets to kill people. And then when the white warlord gets killed, that's when it sets him off.
You're like, oh fuck. I almost thought that like there was going to be some sort of like, are they going to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse that set off this like wave of crime throughout all? And then I was like, oh man, this seems like it could exist in the world of Snake Plissken.
Well,
and,
it's funny.
This is the beginning before America just loses its shit.
Can I hit you with something?
Sure. Yeah. I think I already know what it's going to be.
You said it. You son of a bitch. This is a prequel. This is before the world fully goes to shit and there's like prison islands, like Manhattan and LA are prison islands.
Well, I think that John Carpenter, when he writes these things, he does the Stephen King thing where he's like, what if it's all connected, but like he's not going to fully make everything set in Maine and everybody's a writer or whatever. And like, oh yeah, the character in this is going to go to Derry and buy a ice cream cone and then, leave and then
not see Derry for the rest of the movie. Just,
yeah, exactly.
Just stop through there.
They just want to know that it all exists. Whereas John Carpenter's like, he has a particular sort of idea of the world and like how messed up things are, but he wants to have it be fun in a way, right? Like everything that he deals with is always disturbing and gross and strange and odd. But it all is fun in the end. When you watch a John Carpenter movie, it's fun. You're never kind of like, ugh.
Yeah.
I never want to watch that
It's
again.
exhilarating. Yeah.
But I mean, even like Big Trouble in Little China feels like it could exist in his universe. Starman feels like it could exist all in the same universe. It seems like he has this connected universe without it being connected, sort of thing.
Because they're also grounded. Like even the ridiculous nature of Snake Plissken, it's pretty grounded to assume that LA will be, an earthquake will happen. It'll get split.
Yeah, I mean,
it'll become
Snake
a wasteland.
Plissken has been around the world. He definitely would know how to surf.
That's ridiculous. Okay, Escape from New York is a little bit more feasible, I guess. Especially the way that they, in the 1970s, this is the way that people saw the world. Yeah. It was just
Snake Plissken. He's a very athletic man. He would definitely know how to shoot hoops.
And win a basketball game to save his friend's life or whatever.
Snake Plissken, he's a man of the world. He would know how to hang glide. No problem.
With one eye.
That movie is a movie for kids, but with an R rating, I'm realizing. I watched Double Dragon last night for the show I was on, and that is like one of those situations like Escape from LA and the opposite of a movie like this, where in this movie we don't even see that big explosion at the end, and in Double Dragon they drive a boat into a sign in the water, and the water's lighting on fire. I don't know why. It's the same kind of like place as Escape from LA, like the Los Angeles in that future. I talked.
Well, we all know that Double Dragon takes place in the Escape from LA
exactly.
universe.
It's a prequel.
Yeah.
But it also takes place in the Big Trouble in Little China universe because there's magic in it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But they run into this sign, and it's meant to be that the boat's exploding, but not only does it look like the sign is exploding, the explosion is so big that it's like they blew the budget on that. We looked up the facts, and it was like they spent a huge portion of the budget on that explosion. And then when you look at a movie like this, they spent all the money on like the location.
Actually, a fair amount of the budget ended up going towards the sound design and post-production.
I can see that because it's well edited. It's a well put together film. The music is great. I watched most of it on headphones. So
they perfected the silencer sound effect in this movie. I assume all movies before this used some kind of shitty version of it. The James
Oh,
Bond
oh,
movies.
yeah. I was just gonna say, in James Bond, it just sounds like someone closing a dictionary fast. But uh, no, it's interesting that you're kind of bringing up all these other movies. Not bordering or into dystopian scenery. Where, like, yeah, you can kind of see and They Live, like, yeah, things have gotten so out of hand that this was an opportune time for the aliens to come in and take over and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can
And then
kind of
the
see
alien,
that there's
and then
a
the
level of
alien,
continuity with all this.
yeah, the satellite gets blown up, all the aliens are revealed, and then that's when like the world really goes into an apocalyptic state, and then that's when Escape from New York starts.
But this one is weird because there's like no extras in this movie. They
Oh, also, and then Jack Burton is he's driving around in the desert in his truck, and he drives north, so far north that it becomes Christmas time, and then he accidentally runs over Tim Allen, who is Santa Claus, and then he
Of course,
becomes
the
the Santa
rules of the
Claus in
Santa
those.
Claus
Yeah, and then he
state that.
becomes the Santa Claus in those new Santa Claus movies.
Jesus.
And
That's
then-
my theory.
But how does that tie back into the Santa Claus TV show where Tim Allen comes back in the picture for that?
Oh, that's not canon.
Okay, that's not canon. The TV show is not canon.
Or he hasn't been run over yet. It's gonna happen sooner or later.
That's
Sooner
why
or later.
everyone's watching. They just want to watch Tim Allen get run over.
Yeah.
By a truck,
I
and
know
then
I do.
Jack
Sorry,
Burton's
Tim.
like, hell, I ran over Santa Claus.
So
The elf
we're,
comes up here, man. You got to put his coat on.
We're
Why do I got to put his coat? Jack Burton doesn't put on Santa Claus's clothes. Okay.
we're introduced to Bishop at this point in the movie. He gets called to Precinct 9, like we were talking about. He doesn't want to go because essentially he wants to be a hero cop. This isn't a very. It's a little bit propaganda, but I didn't get that vibe. I kind of got the vibe that like the police in this universe aren't. There's one cop that's like over the top. It's bad, but his partner, incompetent, I should say, but his partner, he was a good egg, and Bishop is like good to a fault. We get the time codes for the points of the movie throughout this, which I kind of liked. It wasn't wasted effort because you get to know that all of this shit happens in about 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours, which was a really neat little thing. I hate it when you watch a movie and you're getting the days and the time codes and the time. Like Christine had a couple that was just like, okay, thank you for telling me that it's 1 month later. I didn't need that. And then we also meet up. We go over to the bus of inmates who are being taken from the prison to another prison. We'll get to why they're important in a minute, but essentially we're introduced to Napoleon Wilson. Napoleon Wilson is one of my favorite characters in a movie, and it's all because of he's like the coolest guy ever, but he just like doesn't give a shit, and he just wants a cigarette. Gotta smoke. That I don't know why that was so effective for me, but I thought that was a great little thing.
It's a fun character trope.
I think that was a cowboy western movie reference. I don't remember what though. But anyway, yeah. But like, yeah, that whole cigarette thing being referenced over and over again is a reference to it's a calling back. It's the smarter way to do references rather than driving to the Romero house.
Yeah. Or hey, do you remember in the movie Fistful of Dollars when he said this?
Yeah, but to have just a little tidbit thrown in, I think that's what that was all about. Was just
the precinct's located on 666 Savini Street.
Well, I will say
where they hit you over the head with the bat.
Nancy's last name is Loomis, so I noticed that in the credits. Basically, it's heavily implied that Napoleon Wilson is like an especially bad criminal. The way they're treating him. I think I got the impression that he was like a criminal mastermind, not necessarily a killer or murderer. Probably has done that, but based on the way they treat him at the end of the movie, he doesn't just get thrown immediately back in prison. We don't see him get thrown back in prison. And I want a buddy cop movie called Bishop and Napoleon.
Right.
Where he's enlisted to become a cop, and him and Bishop and Napoleon have to go and
it's like Assault on Penitentiary 13, and they like the whole jail is like against the people. He gets he's like, he gets like demoted, or like he quits being the lieutenant of the precinct, and then he's like, I'm just gonna go be a prison guard or some shit, and then he goes to be a prison guard for for a precinct, or sorry, for a penitentiary, and it turns out he's in there, and then he's like, "Oh, it's you. What the fuck?" And he's like, "Yeah, what the fuck?
Yeah, what the fuck? We're here now.
Listen, I heard that they're gonna be trying to." And then one of the gang guys, one of the four warlords, he didn't die, and he's in the jail too, and he's like infecting the prison like a virus.
Giving his jar of blood to everybody.
There you go, John Carpenter, come back, make it happen,
Assault
man.
on Precinct 14, Electric Boogaloo. We do. Speaking of infections, we're introduced to that character that turned out to be a total misdirect, or I didn't really understand what the point was, aside from having them stop. And there's a guy who, like, I think he has. I think he's dying. I think he's dying of something. He's got like whooping cough. And he's all sweaty. He's got COVID-19. He's patient 0 for COVID-19. And essentially, they're like, this guy, he's just got a cold. It's fine. It's just got a cold. And they're like, this dude is dying. He's dead.
Yeah.
And that's it. I only thought that was a misdirect in that as soon as they used that. COVID-19.
Took me a minute. I was like, what's a better joke?
Hey guys, stop the show for a second.
Yeah, COVID-13. Yeah.
But they only used them really to get them to stop. I thought it was going to be more of a thing, and I for a minute I was like, is there a supernatural like virus element to this movie? I didn't know what this was going in. So
well, I mean, that is kind of, again, that's a trope of a zombie movie, right? Is that one of the people is infected and they bring it inside, they give it shelter, and then it turns on them from within, and it was interesting. But zombie movies weren't as, there wasn't a giant garden of zombie movies that you could go and pick from at this point. There was a smaller world of zombie films. There was still a decent amount.
They were huge in the 70s.
They were big in the 70s. They were the late 60s was when they sort of kind of really started to hit off, and not just Western movies either. Like the Italian film market was like exploding with zombie movies as well. So it was kind of a worldwide phenomenon where it's like everybody was obsessed with everybody had zombie fever. And then it went to sleep in the 80s and the 90s even, and then in the late 90s it started to come back
in the 2000s.
Well, it's funny you say like Italian and European movies have like had a home for exploitation and zombie and all this other stuff, and even Westerns after it kind of died out in the US, because when this movie first released in the US, it had a terrible time in the theaters.
Right.
A lot of it had to do with the trying to get a solid rating for it, because the MPAA wanted to give it an X rating at first.
Yeah, so
mostly because of one scene in particular.
Because they shoot a child.
Yeah, there's no MPAA rating segment this week because I couldn't find it. Like, actually couldn't find it. And Tim, I think what you're saying is the insight that you mentioned, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the person that was responsible at the time for giving out the ratings for movies wanted to give this movie an X rating. And there's a scene where the father and daughter are going to get ice cream, and the roaming gang comes up and targets the ice cream truck guy. And then while they're shooting him, they also shoot the little girl. And it's for 1976, very, very graphic.
I was like, she's not
very
dead.
Upfront.
It grazed her shoulder.
But they did through the ice cream
movie trope of putting
her chest, yeah.
Yeah. If it was like on a Columbo, she would have been alive at the end. But no, this ain't Columbo.
Yeah.
No, she's dead as dirt in this. And so that scene in particular where she visibly gets shot, the MPAA person wanted them to cut it out of the movie, otherwise they would give it an X rating, which meant it wouldn't get any kind of release whatsoever. So the film that they submitted for their review,
Betamax, buddy.
the version that they submitted for the review withheld on that scene, and then they said, okay, good, we'll give you the R rating. And then the distributed copy of the movie kept that scene in.
Okay.
So they managed to sneak in this girl getting shot. So when people started watching the theater and then realized, oh, there's a child getting shot in this movie, it got backlashed in the US. But then in 1977, a year later, it managed to make it to like Cannes and other film festivals in Europe. And then people saw that it was this movie taking some bold choices and bold decisions, and it took off from there. And that's when it started to kind of gain some ground.
Okay.
Because initially it wasn't a success, so it took a long time, all things considered, for this thing to get some traction.
So this is like a
I think one of the reasons
cult
it's
film.
a little bit, yeah. I think one of the reasons it's hard to track down the amount of money that it made is because it made money in weird ways where people were like not really tracking it.
Yeah,
So it's kind of hard to find the box office for this.
yeah.
We don't even really have a domestic box office for it. So
I will say, in addition to there being no MPAA this week, there's no real title drop, because they do say Precinct 9 at one point, but that's not even the right precinct. That's not even the name of the movie.
It's like Precinct 9 in District 13, and
Division
the building
14.
has a 14 on it, and it's like this is how unorganized the Los Angeles police departments are, is that they don't even know the names or numbers of anything that they're dealing with.
But the studio's like it's got to be spooky. 13.
Yeah, even when we get our first introduction to Ethan Bishop, you know, he's going out on his first day as a lieutenant, I guess, or it's his first day in charge of a new precinct. And he wants to be a hero, and the guy on the other line, his captain, I suppose, who he's talking to, is like, I think the captain just got on to talk to him to like kind of be like, hey, good luck, you know, out there, and have a good time and try to be safe. You know, it's more like it was almost like a congratulations on your new position kind of thing.
Yeah.
But then he gives him like a weird little powwow.
He says I wrote it down. He says there are no heroes anymore, just people that follow orders.
Yeah, which is like, ugh.
Yeah.
And we've already seen that the police in this movie are kind of shit in the very first scene. Freeze! It's the police. Put your hands up and your weapons down, or we'll shoot. And then like they shoot immediately. There's like no room to breathe before they start firing on them. And you're like,
it's almost like a wartime situation. When he says to him, I just need you to follow orders. You know, it's like something you'd hear in a World War II movie.
Yeah,
but then like, you know, the internet is polluted now with so much evidence of police officers believing that kind of shit, and like just the interactions that you see in everyday life on YouTube, TikTok, Reddit, all of it. You get all these, you know, people filming the police, and they act like they're super soldiers from a science fiction movie, where you're just like, what is this guy's deal? Like he's acting like he's in the most like battle war-torn country, and he's dealing with people that, you know, he is convinced are hiding IEDs or whatever. You're like, okay, this is fucked up.
There's no de-escalating behavior. And meanwhile you're kind of treated to the jaded cops versus people who live and breathe in the world. As that lieutenant arrives to his assignment at the precinct, and he's being introduced to everybody, and getting these little moments of talking to all these people, and with the one secretary in particular, they have a good one-on-one where you learn a lot about them. That one, she's been around the block, she knows, she's kind of seen the harder side of things, and then he made an explanation of like early on in his life, he was taught some strong morality and by his father, and at the same time, he was shown that police can be positive figures of authority.
But and the contrast there is that like at every other avenue that we're presented, except for him, we are in a cab world, right? Where we're just like, no, all police are shit. Like even the dad driving the car, and little girl's like, let's ask them for help.
He's like,
and
no.
He's like,
no.
She's like, my teacher told me that you know, all police officers are always there to help you.
And he's like, it sounds like your teacher's teaching sixth graders, you stupid idiot. And
she's like, what?
He's like, nothing. Let's go get some ice cream.
I like her voice is also Big Bird's.
Yeah. We get a great moment.
That's as high as I can go.
We get a great moment around this area of the movie where they're loading, like Napoleon is so good, and they're loading the inmates into the truck, and basically he's like, look, you're taking me in a truck where I got to sit for hours. Okay. Then you're going to put me in a prison where I got to sit for the rest of my life, potentially 30 years or more. Can
He
you
says
just
90 years.
90 years or more. Can you let me just do a little stretch? So he does this. And
He's
then
doing some yogi.
And then the warden is like, it says something to him. I forget what he says, but he goes,
Says, I'm going to miss you.
yeah. Oh, right. And then he says, even a little white lie can trip a man up. And he's like, huh? And he takes the chain and lassos him basically and trips him.
He does a cowboy movie.
This is
a cowboy movie, guys. He's a cowboy.
Yeah. He's a cowboy movie character stuck in this movie.
we also miss, like, because when they're taking him out of his cell, that guy, the warden, punches him in the back of the head, knocks him out, and he's like, I just don't sit in chairs the way I used to. And I'm like, that's such a weird thing to say, but it's also kind of funny. And then when he lassos him, he's like, he just doesn't stand the way he used to.
Yeah.
It's just like,
yeah.
It's
he says
a John
the same
Carpenter
line. I'm like,
thing.
what a weird line.
It's a John Carpenter thing too, as we've talked about a lot, to have weird dialogue that only from the mind of John Carpenter could this sort of dialogue be so bizarre but work. You know, like
when they ask me,
because it's in that context of that situation where, like,
when they ask me, Jack, have you paid your dues? I tell them the check's in the mail. Just like John Carpenter, like drunk, like writing shit down. Like, yeah, this is sick.
This is dope. People are gonna eat this up in 40 years.
it would be great to hear John Carpenter say, "This is dope."
Yeah.
He only says that when he's like, when someone's like, "What is that?" and he's pointing at a giant bag of weed that he still buys from a dealer. He doesn't go to the dispensary.
Hey, my dad would prefer to buy from a weed man.
Yeah,
it's about the same age. Actually, no, he's not, because John Carpenter just turned 78 years old. So,
wow, he's probably got a prescription now.
Yeah. He doesn't even want that Hollywood.
I got old bones.
He doesn't even want that Hollywood, doctor weed. He just wants to go to a guy.
He needs the medicinal weed for his knuckles.
In the neighborhood of Precinct 13, he wants to go
He still composes music. He needs to keep the key ticklers nimble for his synth music.
I've seen him play live. It's a wild scene to see him and his band with his son. That was cool. That was a really cool concert, actually.
I would love. That's like a concert I would go to.
Absolutely. We missed out on that because I feel like 10 years ago he was touring like pretty frequently.
Yeah. That was exactly when.
Yeah.
He released a bunch of albums called like the Lost Carpenter tracks, and he like recomposed music for all of his movies and stuff. It's pretty cool.
I have a song in my playlist in Spotify where it's just like a John Carpenter song for a minute, and then he says something along the lines of, and that at that night was the mouth of darkness, diggy 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 diggy, or something like
darkness.
That. Yeah, I don't know. I'll send it to you. It's fucking great.
Yeah. It's like the Vincent Price and the Michael Jackson.
Yeah. So we go over to the people we were just talking about, the man and the girl. They're driving. That dude looks familiar as shit. I didn't look him up. I didn't have a lot of time to do any real research, but he looks like I've seen a face I've seen, but he might just look like somebody else. He kind of looks like maybe Viggo Mortensen when he's not Aragorn, like in other movies where he's got like the blonde hair. Maybe a little bit.
He did a lot of TV, but he's not in anything that I'm still a little too young for, because he's fairly old in this movie, right?
Yeah.
So it's like
that was part of it too. I was trying to look at him like, is it just a guy I recognize who plays bit parts as a much older man in things now? I don't know. It's one of those like he just has one of those faces.
He was in Days of Our Lives in 1989.
We talked about the fact he didn't want the police help. I thought this guy seems a little shady, but after we talked about it, you're right. This universe has a kind of an anti-police sentiment, and
especially in a neighborhood like that they're in, right? So they're trying to get, I think, his mother or like his wife's mother or something. We don't really know who it's. The girl's nana is all we really know about it. Is that he's trying to convince her to move out of the neighborhood because it's crime ridden, and there's a gang who bleeds into blood bowls every morning as a ritual of some kind.
Every morning.
So we don't know, but we do know that it's a bad neighborhood. So but also maybe he's also had some bad experiences with police officers. I know personally, I am not comfortable around police officers, even when I know that I've done absolutely nothing wrong. I don't like talking to them, especially if they approach me. There was one time where I approached them, and it was when I was being chased by someone who wanted to hurt me. So I ran into the road, and I saw a police car, and I jumped on the front of the car. They got out, and I was like, "This is chasing me!" And then they helped me. And
Didn't
it was
you
good.
have a thing where you like called a wellness check on a friend, and then they came to your house and started questioning you, also, which was like very Gestapo.
I was like, I called. Yes, I don't want to.
Yeah,
we don't have to get into it, obviously, but
yeah.
I have had a lot of bad experiences with police officers, as more so than the good ones. Like I've had maybe 2 really good ones, and then the rest have always been shitty or bad.
And speaking of the police, sorry, go ahead, Tim. My bad.
Oh no, I was going to say that Napoleon actually one of his functions in the movie is where he seems to divide people's opinions. Where the guy running the prisoner convoy in the bus, he kind of is drawn up by Napoleon to approach and ask, like, what's your deal exactly? Because you're not a psycho, you're not this, so what is your deal? Why are you called Napoleon and all that kind of stuff? And so I get and it kind of also informs of Napoleon that because we see police officers that are not cool hating him, and other police officers that are either in the gray area or are good, that find him approachable.
I think
that there's something about this guy that has divided people. He's done, and whatever his crime was, it's checkerboarded. It's not quite
I think that
completely
based
all
on his character arc and how intelligent and like quippy he is. He's a guy who calls shots. He's a top.
He's a real Snake Plissken, if you.
I think he's a top guy. I think he's a criminal mastermind, and he's a superhero level intelligence criminal mastermind. Obviously, we don't get into any of that. That's pure speculation and headcanon as well.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but I will say that he's not a bad guy. He's a smart guy who got into a bad situation and he had to get out of it. We never know his history, but he doesn't seem to have any kind of resentment or hatred or villainous tendencies towards anybody. But then again, he's never in a situation where he would need to flex those types of things, right? He's always in a situation of submission. And then the situations that he does have the ability to be dominant, he doesn't. He is able to assess the situation and figure out, okay, it's in my best intention at least to side with this person and maybe ask them if they have a cigarette. And if they do, they might give me a cigarette.
Most people won't, because
it's always on the dialogue tree.
Everybody didn't, even though everybody in the universe smoked in 1976, nobody smoked.
Except nobody in this movie, except for the what was her position at the police station? Was she a police officer, or she was just?
They said police officer later in the movie. I thought that she was like an office administrator, but then they said that the person on the operating board was the secretary.
I think she was just a cop who was in like her regular clothes.
Yeah. As they were shutting things down.
It's funny, we were talking about how the criminals are just like out of control bad. We just get a shot of them just like getting their guns ready at this point. And John Carpenter loves just showing people doing things, and we get a lot of that throughout this little bit.
Well, did you guys watch the post-credit sequence?
I don't recall seeing a post-credit sequence on my copy.
One of the gang members, he runs to a church and he goes through a secret door into the basement, and there's a giant tank of glowing green ooze, and he starts drinking it. And this is a prequel to The Prince of Darkness, guys.
Yeah. And then he turns around, he's got a Thanos chin, wrinkly chin on. Yeah.
Snake Plissken just shows up. He's got the eye patch already. Shit. I'm putting together an initiative. A Carpenter initiative. So we get the scene with the cop on the scene, but what scene is that? Oh yeah, Precinct 9. I don't know why I wrote that. We meet 2 women, an operator, and I thought an office admin, but we determined she's a police officer. And she offers him coffee. This is a funny line. And she offers him coffee, and she says, "Black?" And he goes, "For over 30 years." Great. And I was like...
Yeah, that's like a real like Shaft kind of line, which I kind of liked. Because he's not a Shaft character, he's not like Mr. Cool. He's kind of nerdy almost. And he's like endearing, in a way.
Where very like, straight-laced individual.
Where he comes into this piece of shit precinct that's shutting down, and he looks on it like... I'm in charge of this, and he's like proud of himself, and I'm like, you know what? I'm proud of him too. Like that's a good accomplishment, and I like it, and I like that he's.
The implication.
There's almost like a Star Trek Academy thing about him. Where like, yeah, like I'll do the right thing regardless.
Mm-hmm.
The implication though, where he says for over 30 years, is this guy 31 or 32? Because God damn it, people looked old in the 70s.
He could be 40.
He could be 40.
But also he's hit lieutenant, which is like
right.
It's a pretty big milestone for police officers because not all police officers are able to do that, and some of them do it younger and some of them do it older. And he seems like he could be in his middling 30s, maybe.
Okay.
And he mentioned that like I left this neighborhood. I walked out myself when I turned 20.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, you know, okay, so like 10, 15 years on the force or whatever of working his way through all that kind of stuff.
And an old-looking 35. We do get a scene here that's pretty interesting that does talk about his like past when he does mention that he left 10 years ago, where he tells a story about coming into the precinct as a kid because, we find out it's because he was using foul language with his father. And during that time...
No, his mother.
Or his mother.
His father punished him because he was swearing at his mother or something like that. Yeah.
But he did end up carving something on the desk, and he like feared for the rest of his childhood that he was going to get busted. I happened to look away at like just for that like 1 second. Did they showed the carving, right? Oh, they don't show the carving.
So that was one of my so sometimes I write down questions for the pod. And I'm like, last week, I think it was, what song would you have put during this car on fire murder scene? This week is, what do you think he wrote? Because she says a little advanced for a 10-year-old or something like that. Like, what do you think he wrote? Like fellatio?
He drew
I was going to say something probably sexually charged.
He drew a picture of a dick with wings that said, "Fuck the police."
No, he just wrote a cab.
It's so advanced that it's literally from 40 years in the future. So advanced that
he saw into the future.
Yeah. I'm not too sure. I like how much like so much else in this movie, it's left to your imagination, and it's also the point of it is that it's not incredibly important to know. Mm-hmm. So much like with Napoleon, that like to not know exactly what he did, like to find that out would just be the equivalent of doing a Wikipedia lookup on him, because what's more important is that you still understand what kind of person he is.
Right.
And same goes with everybody, is that they're very well telegraphed in who they are and what they're doing.
But it also gives you an understanding of who he was as well, right? Like he
in certain contexts,
as a kid, he was so sort of out of control that his father sent him to the police station to spook him. Yeah. And he, at the police station, carved something foul into somebody's desk. Like, rather than be scared shitless, he's like, well, the guy went to the can or to get a coffee or whatever, I carved something into his desk. But then he admits that, like, for months and months after that, I was scared he was going to see it and that he'd be hunting me down.
Yeah.
And it's evocative. It's interesting and it's cool, and it gives you an idea of who he is as a character, and how much he's grown since then, right? Like how he's changed.
This almost like
he became a police officer.
Almost like decade
the course of his
time
life
marks
potentially.
Mm-hmm.
So during all of this, we just get some more shots of the criminals just rolling around town, threatening to shoot people, shooting people, doing robberies. And they
don't rob anyone. They just, the guy is like, he keeps almost shooting people.
Right.
Like he's aiming out the window with a silenced machine gun, and you're like, oh God, this is vile. But then I think about myself when I'm playing like GTA or something, and I do that all the time. Like just like aim out the windows at people, like, and I'm like, oh, am I one of these guys? Am I part of the gang?
Well, when you point a gun at somebody in GTA, if the police are around, if you just point the gun at them, they'll react.
I know, but I do it from in my car, and I do a slow drive-by, and I go, ugh. And then I cut my arm open, and I bleed it into a bowl, and I say, I'm going to use this to mark my territory later.
You're such a blood pervert.
A blood pervert. That's what their gang should have
blood
been
perverts.
Called. The blood perverts. Yeah.
A blurvert.
The blurverts.
Yeah, I would say, Leon, that Steven is a degen from Upcountry. That's welcome to the chat. Welcome to the show. So I don't want to dial down on this too much because it happens throughout this sequence, but it cuts back to the guys being like, this guy's going to die. What are we going to do? But now we get the sequence where the ice cream man is in his truck.
In his balloon shirt,
In
which
his
I liked.
balloon shirt.
It's not a shirt made of balloons. It's just a dress shirt with balloon print.
Well, he's an ice cream man.
I sometimes forget if I don't explain. People in the chat might be like, "He's wearing a shirt made of balloons."
John Carpenter.
Is it one balloon or like a bunch of little balloons?
He's a balloon pervert. Yeah. The little girl.
No, this character is the best character in the movie because he's the only one who is 100% aware of what the fuck is up.
Right.
Because he's like he's terrified that he's on like the one ice cream route that could mean life or death.
That's right.
He's driving around being like, oh God.
In my mind, I always thought like maybe this guy's an undercover cop and he's using the ice cream truck as a cover to like scope the streets. I mean,
smart, and I
absolutely
did not even consider that.
Not that information's not peppered into the movie whatsoever. So that's absolutely my idea. But like, I thought that would have been interesting if that's the whole reason why he's probably very cautious because it's a very scary neighborhood.
This has clearly happened to him before based on his reaction to the car just like driving back and forth. Basically,
it's like he recognizes the car. Like he knows that car is like
and clocking it. Yeah, like,
basically
it's like I was saying earlier, like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Like he sees that car and he's like, oh shit, death is coming. Yeah.
Basically, what happens in this scene is that the dad just pulls over to like call the person that they're going to see, I think. And while he's when he's inside the phone booth or at the phone booth, she's like, "Ice cream! I'm gonna get some ice cream." Like the dad doesn't know that this neighborhood is bad or something because he's just like, "Yeah, whatever, go." And then she goes over.
Well, he knows it's bad. He says it's bad earlier. That's why they're trying to get grandma out of there.
Right, but it's just crazy to me that he's just like, "Yeah, whatever, go get the ice cream." And then she gets a bullet. She takes a bullet for her.
I think that he knows it's bad, but he doesn't know it's shoot children on site bad. Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah, at the ice cream truck. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The ice cream man almost doesn't die. Also, they sort of tease him, and I guess they stab him because he's bleeding on the ground and he dies, and his last words are like,
no, they shoot him.
They do shoot him.
They do shoot him,
but they just have those silencers.
Yeah, so they shoot the girl first and then they shoot him because they they put the gun in his mouth because they don't talk. They never talk, and it's one of the more powerful elements about them is that they don't talk. Because like usually in movies like this, the gang members will say horrible things or things to assert themselves as like alphas, quotation marks around that because it doesn't exist, but
the producers or screenwriters come up with something really, really stupid for them to say,
or like something that's like overly flowery or poetic, and they it just like doesn't work. It doesn't feel natural. It feels like you're like watching some sort of like bullshit Shakespeare. It doesn't make any sense. But instead he just puts the gun in his mouth and the guy is like, don't hurt me. Oh God. And then he doesn't kill him, and then he just pistol whips him. And then the little girl, after getting her ice cream cone, realizes it's not a vanilla twist, it's just a regular vanilla. Right, so she has to go back and get swapped out for the right ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And she goes, hey,
this Karen.
I wanted a vanilla twist.
And then he just shoots her. He doesn't even look at her. He just like blind shoots her.
Like, you're bugging me, you die.
It's shocking, but at the same time, like the way it's framed, it's like holy shit, and you can't help but be like, what the fuck?
Yeah,
like,
that's what
I did not expect that.
Yeah, it's very matter of fact. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never seen
you don't expect a blood pack exploding on a kid.
Yeah. I can't think.
I don't think squibs were like I think they made it illegal to put squibs on kids after like a certain point. Like you can't put it's really an explosive device on a child.
Yeah. So basically, the dying man's final words are like, they went that away, and there's a gun under the dashboard. There's a gun under the dashboard. Get my gun, take my gun. It's under the dashboard. Right.
Yeah.
I wrote that down wrong. So
they went that away.
I improvised.
Points, but he's got an ice cream cone in his hand, and he points at the ice cream.
Anyway, he takes off after him. Also, after they have, he like shoots off a couple rounds at them, right?
So this is like, but the reason I think this works so well is because we're seeing these four different stories happening simultaneously, basically, and
Yeah.
you're you think maybe they're gonna all converge, but you're not sure, and then they do, and you're like, okay, this is great. They all have to go to this one point, precinct 13 or 9 or 14 or whatever the fuck we want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, and it is good. It's neat and it's tidy and it's like we always say about every John Carpenter is that he's very efficient with what he does. He doesn't really put stuff in there for fluff. Everything that happens is happening
Yeah.
specifically to push the story forward. And this movie is like up until they get to the precinct is perfect with that. And then it kind of gets very Dawn of the Dead where it's like, now what do we do? We're in here. I guess they'll come through the holes that are everywhere and we shoot them. But up until I would say this, the first like 25 to 30 minutes of this movie is like extremely efficient and well made. I love it.
Yeah, right down to the next scene, which is like this guy's dying, the sick guy. They pull up to precinct 13. They load the guys into the cells. The guys in the cells are like, so how long are we going to be here for? And Special Agent Stoker is like, shut up. You guys are a load of bad dudes. Did you notice? I thought it was so funny when they show Bishop pounding a sign into the ground with a mallet. I was like, it was very cartoony to me for some reason.
I mean, there's a couple of
like
cartoony
a handwritten
moments.
sign. Yeah. Like
Some
a Wile E.
real,
Coyote
like-
thing to do.
Exactly.
Yeah, like it's some real Looney Tunes stuff. There's a few moments like that in this, but I think that the sign, even the blood squib on the kid is just like I think it's just the framing. It's almost like it's framed like a comedy shot, and you're like, what the?
Okay, yeah, because it is a little flat, and yeah, which kind of lends to the whole like there's the beginnings of John Carpenter's film language, but it's not quite translated yet. His talent is still very raw in this. But there's something here. There's something here.
This movie definitely has the John Carpenter film look. It looks a little bit ahead of its time cinematography wise for the 70s. A lot of times I was forgetting that it was a 70s movie, because if you watch like Dirty Harry or something, it looks like it, 70s. Everybody's very 70s, dressed 70s. There's a lot. It's shot different. This looks like an 80s movie.
Oh, you see that dad's pants when he goes up
That's
to his
true. They
dead
were
daughter?
extremely flared.
Yeah.
And in Bishop,
I thought somebody was throwing the trash out next to the body. Like 2 garbage bags. Those were the bottoms of his pant leg.
Bishop knows who Napoleon is, and this is where you get that vibe. That's like, this guy has that notoriety of criminal. This is where I started to be like, oh, he's definitely had his hands in a lot of crime pots. And if this
crime pies,
and if this, oh god damn it, that was a grenade joke. Gross. The thing that I love about it is that he just kind of looks at him and he's just like, oh god, I got to deal with this guy, even though he's going to be my future best friend.
But he also, there's a weirdness there that seems like he knows who he is, and he almost like respects him in a weird way, because when he asks him for a cigarette, he says no, but then he says sorry. He says sorry right
he
after.
humanizes the situation with him. Yeah, that like you're not just another person, and while you're here, you're under my care, and I take that seriously.
Yeah.
And also when he is told that like, oh, that's Napoleon, he's like, really? Like he was kind of expecting something a little bit more caricaturized of like a cartoonish villain, but it's just
scar over
just
one
a guy.
eye.
Yeah.
And he wants to go take a look at him, right? Like he's like, let me go take another look at this guy who has weird posture. Like it's like his whole.
That's my impression of him.
Pretty good impression. You have to be like super stiff but super chill.
Hold on. Here, wait.
We'll have screen captions.
Anybody got a smoke?
Once again, Steve bringing the fire impressions to the show.
The thespian has returned.
That was a physical impression more than a vocal one.
It's true. Yeah. If you're listening to this on audio, go over to YouTube and watch it again.
It's a feast for the eyes.
And comment, like, and subscribe. We cuts back to the chase happening. The dad is chasing after the criminals. They end up next to a payphone where he tries to make a call, but he doesn't quite make it and runs into the precinct. I think is basically what happens there. And this is when
did we talk about how he shoots one of the gangsters already?
Oh yes, that's right.
He chases
tries to make a call, and then the criminals start coming up to.
Well, no. He grabs the gun from the ice cream truck. He gets into his car and he leaves his dead daughter and the dead ice cream
to rot in the grass.
And he drives after them and he chases them, and he's chasing them until the sun goes down, basically. And then he finally catches up to them. They get out. The main, like the white one, who is seemingly the leader, I guess. I don't know. He seems like he's the leader at that point.
He's the most badass.
Well, the camera focuses mostly on him for most of it. So you're like, this guy's in charge, but maybe it's just because like we want to get connected to this weirdo in some way. But he shoots like a rifle at this dad who's like dodging these silenced rifle shots. He shoots him in the arm, and then the guy's like, he got me. And then he shoots again. Dad dodges again, and then unloads the entire gun into it. One-handed too. Like no training, just does it. Kills this guy. The guy falls over. He stands there for a while, shocked that he's been shot. This is another thing where, like, the supernatural element that we were talking about, where it's like there's something going on here. Like, are they on drugs?
They're very detached.
Is the blood bowl like some sort of ritual that they're getting powers from the other side? Who knows?
Yeah. Or in the other room was there some mountain of cocaine that we just didn't see.
Or like, like behind them, there's like all these tubes of heroin just constantly pumping into their backs as they're cutting themselves open. Like, ugh. But
or there's one of those tanks, green goo tanks in this neighborhood.
We already just established this takes place in the same.
There's some green goo somewhere here.
That the church in the Prince of Darkness is in this neighborhood.
Yes.
It's right next to the precinct. That's why in the Prince of Darkness the police don't come help, is because they're dealing with their own shit over there. It's happening on the same night. So he gets shot, and there's this kind of great moment where he falls over dead, and then dad he kind of stumbles off into the darkness because he's still in shock from his daughter dying. But
I don't think he says another word through the whole movie.
He doesn't. He whispers things to people in their ears, and it's like he says he needs to use the can. Okay. But there's this good shot where like the guy dies, and then you see like the feet come up of all the other three, and there's only three sets
from
of
the
footprints.
darkness.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, man, there's something else going on in this movie.
Absolutely.
There's some sort of supernatural element.
He makes it to Precinct 9 now, and when he gets inside, basically they establish that, this guy has something to do with what's going on in the neighborhood, and this is where he does the whisper thing, right? And then the lights go out, and we basically get to it.
Yeah, the phone goes out first, and they think maybe the phone company turned it off. Then the power goes off, and then they realize, like, oh shit, something's happening, because the lights are still on in the parking lot, but it's the building that's been cut off, and they're starting to sort of, they're not stupid, which I appreciate, because like in movies like this, a lot of the time people make such idiotic decisions that don't make any sense, but in this, they're all sort of like intelligently deducing what's happening. They're like, something's wrong. We have to go figure out what's up.
Well, they do kind of do that thing, that stupidity thing, where like one guy runs outside to be like, I'm going to go out there and see what's going on, and gets killed. And then another guy's like, that guy's he fell over. Actually, that was a funny line where Bishop was like, hey, look, he fell over.
No. That's not what happened. Okay, so what happens is that the power goes out. So they're like, we'll go check the breaker. So he goes out to check the breaker. He gets shot and he falls over. The circuit breaker person, I can't remember what her name was. Switchboard.
Janet or something.
She's like, the phone company should be doing this. Why the fuck am I doing it? That girl.
Okay, yeah.
And she is watching through the window, and she laughs. She's like, oh, he fell over.
Right, yeah.
And then Bishop's like, what? And then he looks, and she's like, he fell over there. And then he looks out, and the guy's just lying there not moving, and he's like,
that guy is dead.
That's kind of weird. Yeah, I should go check that out.
Actually, just before that part, though, the officer that's running the prison bus, just before, like, he's like fed up and he was trying to reach a doctor to help out the sick guy, and that's when the phone line gets cut off, and he starts making criticisms towards the lieutenant, and he says, your precinct is being run like chicken, night, and turkey. And I love that line.
So I wrote
that
that
should
line
be the other
down.
title of the movie.
I wrote that down, and I don't know what that means. Can you explain that to me, please?
I'm guessing like they're making a joke about turkey, that it sounds like the name of the animal turkey.
Oh,
and you're
like
running
chicken
and you're
night and
having
turkey.
chicken
Okay.
when you should
Right.
be having turkey. That's my best throw dart at the wall and see what happens. Guess at it.
Yeah. See, I was like, am I stupid, or is that the joke? Like, so
It's a John Carpenter line.
So it turns out that I did understand it. I just thought that I was too dumb to understand it. Okay. I feel better about myself now.
That's incredible. But then people start going outside to be like, what's going on? And then they start lighting the building up, and the guy who was traveling with the inmates, he gets killed. Bishop kind of uses him as a human shield and almost gets got too. And then it's
a really good action sequence, especially considering the budget is so low, and that you're not seeing where any of the fire is coming from is really good. You're just seeing, bullet holes go off, squibs go off, windows breaking, and people in fear. And it's focused on the people in fear, and it's not showing like, people running through the woods. They're not wasting time with that, because that it makes it more frightening, and I kind of like it.
This is
or doing a close up of a barrel with a muzzle flare to let you know it is a gun. Yeah, it's not spoon feeding you stupid stuff.
Or showing a scope moving, because they apparently in this movie they couldn't figure out how to show a scope moving or binoculars moving. Every time they show binoculars, it's just a completely locked off with like the shape of binoculars, and I'm like, nobody can hold binoculars that still. Like that is not right.
They literally do that. Like that's a thing that happens in this movie, which is crazy, because it's just a filter, obviously.
Yeah, they just like cut out cardboard and put it on the lens of the yeah.
And then once they head back inside, like,
can we do a quick chat shout out here?
Yes.
So yes. Noel has listed an amazing amount of movies where children are killed, and none of them are as
in Bird.
None of them are as great as
The Children, movie. Alien vs. Predator, Dawn of the Dead, Face Off, Taps, Dr. Zhivago, American Sniper, Halloween 3, The Toxic Avenger, Ghost Ship, Grave of the Fireflies, Interview with a Vampire, Pet Sematary, Battle Royale, Hunger Games, The Happening, Les Miserables, and Schindler's List.
Well, Toxic Avenger wouldn't be a Toxic Avenger movie if a few children were getting killed in that.
It's not a trauma film unless you got kid death trauma.
Yeah, that Lloyd Kaufman wouldn't be worth his weight in salt if he wasn't killing a few kids in this movie.
And I just want to say, too that I think it's safe to say this is sort of the beginning of the Home Alone of it all. I think that's
so. When do you think in the movie?
What do you think the Home Alone is the Home Alone of it all? Can someone please tell me when the Home Alone? I really gotta know. When is the Home Alone of it all? What is the Home Alone of it all? Now that's the Home Alone of it all.
In my opinion,
the movie Assault on Precinct 13 is when the precinct starts getting assaulted. That's my.
I think so.
That's my moment.
And the lion's share of the plot information has already happened at this point. I think we're moving at a steady clip. We do have a kind of a hard out at between 10 and 10:30 tonight. And I wanted to make sure that we covered all that stuff, because from here on out, it is essentially a 45-minute long action sequence with a couple stop breaks to just like...
Yeah.
How do we trap this place better?
Yeah. So this first part is awesome. I thought it was so cool. I couldn't look away. The place is just getting shot up through every window. Like they don't even start actually assaulting the place with their human bodies, or their
human bodies,
or their
remember that show?
Student body, or their Prince of Darkness bodies, alien blob bodies. They shoot this place up, and I thought the special effects for this place getting shot up was so cool. And I wanted to ask you guys if you had any insight on how they would have achieved this effect. Did they just put squibs on things and set them off?
Yeah, or even like, I was thinking even for the windows, just something as simple as either yanking the window out or throwing something straight up through the window that wouldn't be captured on film. Like if you're able to get away throwing a rock through it without it being absolutely visible, and it will work, and the edit's quick enough, and it just has to be effective. And you just have to, and that's where I think the sound design in this sequence also helps so very much with keeping it nice and simple. And the fact that we're talking about like them using silencers is a big deal in this movie, because
they talk about it so much,
but because it's something that they're really not used to. And it also adds this element of like, they don't know where they're shooting from. And it also helps to envelope the situation, because the people in the neighborhood, if they are within earshot, no pun, of what's going on, then they won't be able to really tell where it's happening or what exactly is happening. Is it gunfire or fireworks that we're hearing? We don't know.
Yeah.
So it is mentioned a lot, but it is still purposeful, and it adds to this element of like, this is the advantage that these guys have, that they hint to at the beginning, that like they have not just a lot of weapons, but advanced weapons for street gangs.
Yeah.
And
we see a lot of
and that whole sequence with the sound design's great.
Yeah, the sound design's fantastic. We see a lot of different kinds of weapons in this movie. There's a hunting rifle that comes into play at one point. There's various handguns. There's the shotguns at the beginning. There's a shotgun later in the movie. I thought that was a really good. The use
and the setup for those weapons in the precinct are great too, where when he's meeting the old captain who has the bizarre hairstyle, which I couldn't decipher when I looked at that head, but anyway.
I mean, he also
just locking up,
looks odd in general. He's got hat hair, like it looks like he was wearing the hat a lot, and that's why his hair is all weird.
Like there's like two parts interjecting with each other. It was a quantum haircut, but anyway. While he's like giving the dialogue, explaining the situation, and he's gonna get the hell out of Dodge, he's locking up like all the weapons there, and so that's another great setup and payoff in the movies. When everything starts happening, the manic behavior, everyone trying to unlock this thing to get the weapons out, and then when they're finally out, that's when like the big mayhem being fired back at everybody, and great setup with that. I actually really enjoyed that quite a bit.
I think that all three of us can probably agree that like as video game players of the same era, watching that, you're like, we're gonna need that shotgun later.
Yeah.
Where are you putting the key? Where's the key going?
I thought the most ridiculous thing was Bishop firing a hunting rifle from the hip and just wrecking house with it, like not using the sights, just shooting it from the hip, like just.
Well, to me there was also sort of an implication that maybe he has advanced knowledge of weaponry outside of being a police officer, because he knew what silencers were immediately, and like in the 70s it wasn't like common knowledge that a silencer would be a thing. You would be maybe a little bit more like not as well versed. Not everybody played GoldenEye for Nintendo 64 in the 70s. They'd be like, a silencer? Does it make it completely silent? No, it sounds like this.
Just silences it slightly. He does give gives Nancy a gun, or sorry, Lee, actually her name is, another Lee character in a John Carpenter movie. He gives her a gun. She mans the windows. It seems to stop for a little bit.
And all of them, amazing shots.
Yeah.
They're all great shots, everybody.
Which
also leads me to believe that she wasn't just, like, she must have been a police officer, right? Like, she's capping, like, heads, like, from her, like, torso shots, like,
yeah, and not blinking either. She's staring it down.
Yeah.
The other thing about Bishop too is during this scene, after everything stops for a second, he sort of asks about the surrounding area, and we didn't mention it, but when he gets to the precinct, he actually, it's a weird scene where he looks and sees like all the exits and all, like he gets a kind of a screenshot in his head of like what everything looks like. So that kind of lends to maybe he was a military guy, or maybe he had something outside of being a police officer, but he's very meticulous.
Also, this was also the precinct that he was taken to as a 10-year-old boy. Yeah. So like he's probably like trip down memory lane kind of thing, being like, oh, I remember being in here as a kid and my dad trying to scare the shit out of me, and I carved that anal rules or whatever on a desk or whatever.
I love butt stuff.
Yeah, well, I don't know what he wrote.
The operator.
You guys never gave me your answers, but we decided it was a Quentin Tarantino "What's in the briefcase" question.
No,
so.
I told you what I thought it was: a penis with wings that says
you did.
"Fuck the police."
Yeah.
Eat my shorts. I think that's what he wrote.
Yeah, eat all of our shirts.
Yeah.
The operator woman, the secretary, is what she was listed as. Her name is Nancy, I believe. She freaks out a little bit here. She's like, "We got to get out of here," and because she thinks they're gone. And Bishop's like, "No, don't you know that they're literally in the bushes surrounding us? Like, we got to sit tight. Somebody's going to come eventually." And Bishop takes a look out, and he sees they're. It's not just 4 guys at this point. It's like 100 people. Yeah. There's like 100 dudes out there.
It's an army.
It's
an army of, what do we call them? The blood perverts.
The blurperts.
The cholo blood perverts. The thunderstruck cholo blood perverts.
So does anyone know what cholo means? I don't know what cholo means.
It is a Hispanic gang thing to say, and I do think it actually does refer to something about blood, but I might be way off.
I thought a cholo was like
I am not Hispanic.
If you know what cholo means, tell us now.
I thought a cholo was a person of Mexican descent, like living in the United States.
So then why are they called the cholos when it's a clearly like a multi-ethnic gang?
And they make a point to mention
it just
that
used ellipses on us, so I don't know if they're gonna hit us with the information or if they're just shaking their head at our incompetence right now.
I mean, we probably could have looked it up before we did the episode. I looked up the box office for like 2 hours. I couldn't find it.
Are we allowed
I didn't
to
look
say
up
cholo?
Whoopsies.
Believe it or not, this fish belly white nerd was never in a gang. So.
Fish belly.
You're like, but I have been called cholo before, so I'm very confused. Anyway, the gang is called the cholos, but they sacrifice blood into a bowl, and there's like Asian, black, white, like every type of person exists within this group of people, which I think is a smart decision on John Carpenter's part to be like, let's not make it a specific type of person in the gang.
Yeah, because once again, to not over-inform the audience, like with background, it's just like by their nature, you get what they're about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bishop points out that they've set up a roadblock also, so they're shutting it down at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering at this point why the building said Division 14. So they walk up, and
it used to be 14, but we changed it to 13, but we didn't have the money to switch out the number.
Exactly. It's supposed to be assault on Precinct 14.
Spray painted over top of the
But this is when they walk up and they throw blood on the ground and put down a sign that we also don't see, right? They never show what it actually says on that flag, right?
Yeah.
Which is
it's really hard. I even went back a couple times to try and read what it said, and it's too poorly lit. I couldn't understand it. But even the people in the movie are like, I think they're marking us for something.
Yeah. And then he says, it's a goddamn siege.
Yeah.
Which is what the movie was going to be called as well.
A goddamn siege.
But they said not the title of the movie in the movie.
Yeah.
It seems like they want the dad, but they slowly begin to realize that, later they realize that they're just kind of killing indiscriminately at this point. Their revenge is just the fact that they can't get to these people. And the goons now start advancing on them with cars as shields, which is crazy. And they have kind of a shootout. Bishop and the crew are just kind of unloading ammo on them, but it's just hitting the cars.
Interesting.
Yeah. Do you want to read a? Do you want to read a?
Yeah. No, that's actually it kind of makes it make a little bit more sense. So Noel in the chat has told us what it means. It's a loosely defined term with various meanings. Number one, a derogatory term for people of mixed blood heritage in the Spanish Empire, which that makes sense that they're all bleeding into a bowl together. So we have somebody who I think with the hat they're supposed to be of Cuban descent. And then there's like a Mexican guy, a black guy, and a white guy, and they all cut their arms open and they bleed into a singular bowl, mixing all their blood together. And I guess that calling themselves the Cholos, I guess that makes sense.
And then number 2 is basically what I said. A person who dresses as or belongs to
a certain use. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. U.S. subculture who is of Mexican descent. I know the word from like Mexicans who live in Los Angeles are called Cholos, and I just made an assumption based on other movies where they say Cholo.
I've just heard it before, and then I watched it in this, and I was like, I thought that was a bad word. Is it a bad word?
It's not great.
If you like using like a really bad word as your gang name. Maybe that's no one else is allowed to say it, you know, like
it's one of those racial slurs that's like kind of socially acceptable, like cracker. Maybe not.
Imagine
cracker. Cracker's not. I don't think we can say cracker on Twitch actually. Oh shit.
Oh, the video's been dropped. Oh god, we're demonetized. Oh my god, Jason, you owe $200,000 to Twitch for your indiscretion.
I've been canceled on like 90% of our episodes. For basically nothing. One of the groups gets in, and the women kicks him in the nuts.
Yeah, she does a good job of nut busting, and then she also shoots a couple guys.
Yep. Which Napoleon through the rest of the movie is like, you act fast, you're pretty fast, and she's like, I'm a fucking police officer, is what I felt like she should have said to him.
I feel like she's also, because she's in her like regular person clothing, she's like, I don't need to tell anybody here that I'm a police officer.
Yeah.
I feel like I can earn their respect without saying like I'm a police officer. And you know what? She does. And she does a pretty good job of it because she's good at fighting. She's good at talking, and she's not like being swayed by their gross male gaze,
right.
Which is good.
Yeah.
She frees
very stoic.
She frees Napoleon. They escape out from where the cells are. And now there's just multiple men entering the building. They get a it's sort of a MacGuffin. The ammo box that ends up, it's not a MacGuffin. It's kind of a plot point item, but he can't get into the ammo box to get more weapons. And at the very last second, he gets the box open, throws a gun to Napoleon. Napoleon blasts the guys that are coming through the door that were behind him and Lee as they escaped from where
and Napoleon. Poor posture aside, he's a crack shot.
Yeah, he's great.
Maybe that's why he has such poor posture, is because like his skeleton has been like reformed to be able to have the perfect posture for shooting a shotgun from the hip.
He's like Angelina Jolie in Wanted.
Yeah,
he can fire bullets around corners by just whipping
exactly like that.
Exactly like that. They blasted out. Sorry, let me start that over. The guys getting shot out the windows, like they climb up and try to get into the window, and then they get shot and blasted backwards out the window. I thought that stuff looked really cool. The gunplay in this section is really, really cool. I feel like though the shotgun blasts that Napoleon's doing, he's just wasting ammo because he always double taps for some reason. Even though shooting somebody and them falling out of a second story window, I'm pretty sure is one bullet should do it. That's just a nitpick that I had.
I don't think they're on a second story though, are they?
Yeah, they're like upstairs. Remember later when they're like, we can't go back upstairs. It's done.
Right.
Bishop is shooting.
I mean, one floor. I've fallen one floor. My bones are all intact.
But with a bullet in you.
Hey, bullet, no bullet. I feel like my bones will be fine.
I feel like my bones will be fine. The Bishop is shooting a hunting rifle from the hip like it's nothing, which I already pointed out. And then there was that cool shot of them all shooting, like them each taking shots, which I think was just like an artistic thing that John Carpenter just thought up. It's probably like, what if we just show all of them? And that lends to your sort of idea of like, these are all people from different walks of life coming together to sort of.
Well, you have a black police officer in a very like a crumbling neighborhood that he grew up in. You have a mysterious prisoner who is constantly asking people for cigarettes. You have a white woman who is undescript in what her profession is, but she is in the police station, and everybody who was in the police station that knew her is gone, including her friend who gets killed, the switchboard operator. And then you have the other prisoner And then you have the man who has lost his daughter, but nobody knows what the fuck's going through his mind because he's gone into a state of like insanity.
Yeah, he's near catatonic at this point.
He's seen his daughter get killed, and then he's murdered the leader of a ghost gang that's coming to kill everyone.
To the point that this next shot is like they just show the aftermath, and it turns out that the secretary woman is dead, and he's sitting next to her. And I didn't make the note until later to specify now that he wasn't dead, but I thought he also got killed because he's just sitting there like eyes wide open staring. But no, he's just in a weird brain dead catatonic PTSD state.
No, his mind has been lost. Yeah.
I tell you one thing that I kind of hoped from that one part though, with the switchboard person and she got killed, that it would have been somewhat completing her character a bit if she happened to have gotten killed leaping over him, defending him from a bullet.
Yeah,
right.
Because she wanted to give him up, to say like, well, if he's the one that they're after, let's just give him up. And then the lieutenant says, no, while I don't care what it is, but while people are under my care, they're staying alive. We're protecting people. That's our job. And that would have been like a somewhat good tying up that thread for her. But at the same time, it's well within the theming of the movie where there's people who are just getting mowed down at the same time. And yeah, without any dignity or grace to it.
Yeah. And it also just it almost feels like, because this police station is being dismantled, none of them should be there, right? Like none of them, not a single one of them should be there except for maybe Bishop.
That's right.
And this is like the final hours of this precinct before it is really truly shut down forever.
Because the two women were like about to go home for the day.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I had a rant that I was going to go on, but it'll maybe go on too long. So let's cut it off. Yeah, too many threads, but they're all threading into one thing, which is like the survival of the group together. Yeah, which unfortunately slowly starts to get chipped away at.
Right. So we do have to sort of push things along here a little bit. This is where they find the cetraline, explosives. The office woman. Lee has been shot. She gets fixed up. It turns out now that the goons have taken the bodies and put the cars.
Listen,
back.
I think we can safely say that Lee is a cop. She's a cop.
She's a cop.
She's got to be a cop.
They realize that the goons aren't afraid that they could potentially be killed. This is a fight to the death. Wells, the other inmate, he wants to bounce, and Bishop is like, "You can't go out there." Wells is freaking out. It also turns out a little funny thing where Wells's gun wasn't loaded, and because there was a silencer on it, he thought he was shooting bullets, but he wasn't.
He was probably shooting a couple of bullets at first. But you know what? Actually, if he didn't have any bullets at all to begin with, then maybe he thought he was shooting bullets the whole time.
Yeah.
Because like the first few, you would feel a kick. Like you're gonna still, even with a silencer, you're gonna feel a kickback on the gun, right?
Absolutely.
And this is also where Lee turns into Captain Kirk. When she gets like the beam of light on her eyes, and she's like, "Let me do my..."
Yeah, or like a film noir where she's talking about her life and stuff. Yeah. And finally, Napoleon gets a smoke, and we get to see that Lee and Napoleon are smitten a little bit. They keep giving each other sort of like staring, knowing.
I found this disappointing, by the way.
Why?
I just want to, because I think that she and Bishop had really good chemistry at the beginning, and she was like, "Oh, you're the one taking over," and like maybe her.
That's a good point, actually.
Not wanting to like interfere with him taking over the precinct would, stop that, or like a professional respect or whatever, and just like, like nothing comes of that. And then obviously there's like the aspect of like the intrigue of a prisoner who's murdered a bunch of people, and everybody knows his story except us, the audience. Like, who the fuck is this guy? Who did he kill and why? Like, he is like Snake Plissken, basically. And so I guess she's attracted to that. But like at the same time, I think that Bishop is far more desirable to me as an audience member than
I was the opposite. I was like, I didn't even realize that could be a thing till I was like, oh yeah, when they first got there, they had like a little flirty thing. But as soon as I saw Napoleon in her, I was like, I ship that. That's my...
I think that it's my personal, like, a Bishop was like, he's a cutie. He's got this like good spirit, and he's nice, and he trusts everybody, and like he wants everybody to be safe. I'm like, this is the one. You got to go for him. Like, why would you go for this schmuck who has poor posture?
I hate his posture. He's a crack shot though.
Yeah. But at the same time, it's not like outright. It's understated, and you can almost kind of say, in that situation, you're probably building bonds and connections, and then because at the end of it, there is nothing to it. At least Tim's given to the audience.
The catatonic dad. That's what you're into, eh?
I think the catatonic dad and her were really having an off-screen thing.
Yeah.
The other cops are now in the area. They get warned about possible gunfire or maybe firecrackers, and they can't seem to find it, though. And then I love the fact that the incompetent police officer is just like so hard-headed that when his partner is like, why don't we go down that street? There is an actual precinct down there. Why don't we take a look? And he's like, nah, it's just the old Williams Road or whatever he says. It's just a precinct down there. It's obviously not the place.
You mean the precinct on Elm Street? Dun, 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 dun.
Bishop spots a sewer cover and thinks that they might be able to escape through the basement through the sewer, and Wells is like, shit. He's a natural born loser, is what it turns out, because they're like, okay, we'll do potatoes for it. 1 potato, 2 potato, which I do remember from my childhood, but I didn't.
Yeah. But they did prison rules.
Where they just kind of punch each other's fists. I didn't really get what's going on. I thought 1 potato, 2 potato was like you needed a circle of people and like somebody. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, the issue is that they didn't have the rights to rock paper just because they only had $100,000.
So Mills is chosen to investigate the sewer and go through. Napoleon suggests that they hold up in the basement. They have a little bit of talk about faith. Lee doesn't have much. Napoleon says you should hang out with better people. And she's like, but I've been hanging out with cops for the last 5 years. So I think that was a little bit of that, like, look at the camera, like, police are shit. ACAB. Wells makes it to the car, and the goons start to approach again. He hotwires the car, and he thinks he's made it to the payphone and gets shot in the head. Bishop sees this through the window, laughs, and says, oh, maybe the window just broke, which is like...
Maybe it was just some sort of breaking window.
Which is just huffing copium. Just like, it's probably fine. It's just a breaking window.
I thought that part was very weird.
Yeah.
It was shot weirdly, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, it was almost like bordering on a Simpsons gag where like it's a little airborne. It's still good. It's still good. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, this movie passes the Bechdel test when Lee answers Julie's phone line question. So, hey.
Yeah, the bare minimum required.
The bar on the ground.
That's big for 76.
Big time, I would say. None of these girls got their tops ripped off, which is a thing that happens in 70s movies.
Not in John Carpenter movies. Not in John Carpenter movies. You don't see, the only tits you see in a John Carpenter, I think, is They Live.
Halloween? No?
Yeah.
Doesn't Halloween have...
I think you see a half boob, but not a full boob. Yeah.
They head to the basement and they try to make their escape. They have basically no ammo at this point. And Bishop is going to try and make it through with like the 8 bullets they have or whatever. They plan.
Yeah, it's like 3, 3, and 2. Yeah. So that is 8. Yeah.
They plan to set up an explosion. I think meant to be part distraction, part try to like blow up some of the people coming in.
No, they want to funnel them into a hallway.
Yes,
which is great tactics, by the way. I'm playing a lot of Baldur's Gate 3 right now, and funneling people into a hallway is a good way to kill a lot of people.
But it's also like straight up from the old Western Alamo movie, where like the Armada's coming into the actual fort and all that.
Yeah, where they're like, we're gonna put a powder keg over here of black powder, and we're gonna make a string of it. Yeah,
Red Dead some great moments. I think you attack a fortress and you have to like systematically blow up the black powder. The cops do finally show up, but nothing's happening, of course, because the goons are in the bushes and they've just missed the huge like action moment of the car.
But like, what do you think the goons are doing the whole time?
They're just hanging
Are they
out,
all
going like this.
standing there in complete silence, just like lying there in the dirt with their rifles, being like, if anybody leaves, just shoot them.
You shoot them.
They're just doing combat rolls in the
Just
parking lot.
mumbling the word cholo to each other over and over again.
Blood.
Now we got to get a new bucket of blood.
Yeah.
And the cops just leave.
Fellas, I accidentally tipped over the blood barrel.
God damn it. Let's kill him.
We need to fill it up again, and then we're gonna kill you.
So the curious cop I do like, they're trying to leave, and the hard-headed cop is like, there's nothing here. And he's like, that place had a bad vibe to it. I'm like, yeah. And then finally they pull up on, they like pull over, and there's like this tapping on the top of the car, and they're like, what the hell is that? And it turns out that it's blood dripping from a guy that was trying to fix the phone lines.
Yeah.
In the area because the phones.
So this is like unnecessary, right? Like this probably cost them a lot to shoot. They didn't need to do this, right?
It was a cool shot. It looked interesting.
It was a cool shot, yeah, actually.
Yeah, and at least it's giving the audience that.
I thought you were going to say "giving cunt," as they say on the
internet. It was serving cunt so hard.
Oh my gosh. No, but no, they're giving the audience that where like the police aren't just going to show up. There's got to be some little build up as to why they do show up when they do, and so there's got to be something that sparks it off, and that's not out of motif for the film, where there is these little setups and then the payoff, and so like everything you see in this movie is here for a reason, and. It not the most necessary thing. Like you could play it a little more subtly and omit that, but I think for a somewhat general audience, you do kind of want something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I also think that there was probably a scene written into this movie where there is like a phone telephone company van, similar to the ice cream van, that goes up and is like, he's going up and he's dealing with shit, and then it's like, oh, the police line needs to go down, like tomorrow morning, and then he checks it and he's like, police line's already down. It's like, oh, it's not supposed to be down yet, go check it out. And then he goes over there and then he climbs up, and then they're like, and he's like,
and as he's climbing up, it's got to go down anyway. Why am I checking why it's down?
That's exactly what I imagined. In fact, I thought that was that effective to just show that, and it was kind of a horror moment too because you got the blood drip. I liked it.
Yeah,
I liked it.
But I mean, up until that point, I thought that they had just cut the telephone line, right? Like a Scream movie or anything, right? Like I thought that they just like snipped it. I didn't need to see a guy hanging there being like full of bullet holes. But I didn't dislike it. I just was kind of like,
in the comm chatter though, on the police cruiser, they did say, and there's also a missing telephone repair person. Yeah,
like, what the fuck? So that was when I was like, what the fuck? And then they show it like seconds later. I'm like, oh, there he is.
Especially since
found him. Yeah.
Especially since the next part is like the final battle. Like they almost add too much new information right there, I guess, with that whole sequence. But it does lend itself to just allowing you to use your imagination a little bit, which I always appreciate. And it's a John Carpenter thing to just show a gruesome thing that's cool.
Yeah, cut to it.
And speaking of, I really liked how this final scene goes down. Because they get this sign into the basement, or it's just down there, and they're like, we'll use that as like a shield to like push the guys back. And they hear the guys coming in, the goons, and they're walking down the hallway slowly, and they're kind of like, well, if we don't make it out alive, it was good to know you kind of speech. And the guys start coming in. They fire off their like last 6 rounds. A small explosion goes off, and then they push a little. I think
that the conversation between them is a little bit better than that. It's pretty good.
No, I know, but for the sake of time.
Yeah, he asks him like, why you called Napoleon anyway, and he's maybe sometime I'll tell you.
Yeah. I guess that is a part that I should.
And then he's like, well, why don't you tell me now? And he's like, I'll tell you in a couple minutes, like as the explosions are happening and stuff. It's a good moment where you're like the camaraderie between them is strong. You can
this is their bond. Yeah,
absolutely. And I noticed here that Bishop whistles when he's nervous. I think he does it earlier in the movie too, like when he first gets to the
when you first see him and he's scoping the neighborhood as he's getting to his cruiser. Yeah,
or maybe it's just like a tick for when he's absorbing information. Right. Yeah. I wrote down the thing about maybe I'll tell you sometime. So they use the last couple bullets. We hear the explosions off screen, which I thought was ridiculous. Like we don't get one explosion. We just get kind of a flash. There's a man coming through the vent behind them. Lee is there with a gun with her last couple of bullets that she uses up. Another explosion goes off, a bigger one. And then the police show up and the cops find them. And then that's pretty much it. The part that was interesting about the fight scene, I guess, was there was a lot of blood. There was a lot of them batting them off with like he has like a wrench or something or like a baton, and there's a lot of like
what Bishop has like what looks to be like the leg of a child's vanity mirror.
Yes,
like it's like this tiny little like wrap your knuckles if you're bad.
Thanks, Leon. Thanks for coming through. Yeah, that I was like, what is that? What is he holding? He's just batting them off with like this little stick, and he bashes a guy on the hand, and blood goes everywhere. I was like,
starts spewing, and then like another guy just falls over dead, or he's like bleeding from his head, and he's like lying on the ground. I'm like, who hit him? With what? How is that guy? Okay, let's just see what happens. I suppose. Then they blow up the corridor.
Yeah, we get one final. Does anybody got a smoke? Which I thought was great. So they take the dad out of there. Lee, the guy comes down and is like, we got a stretcher for you too, Lee. And she's like, storms past them. It's like, I don't need no man or stretcher. Lee and Napoleon have another
But I am a man stretcher, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
She bounces. I thought this would work as a stage play. I thought this movie would be a great stage play.
A lot of a lot of these types of movies, the holding off until the last moment movies, absolutely would make amazing stage plays. You guys have seen The Hateful Eight? I assume both of you.
I haven't seen it. No.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it.
The Hateful Eight, when I saw that movie the first time, it's 3 hours long. It's very long.
That's why I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
But the reason you didn't watch it is because it was long.
Yeah, because there's movies that I like go to put on and I'm like 3 hours. Anyway, sorry.
I admit at this point in my life that is a thing for me for sure.
Well,
but
all right.
Hateful Eight's great though.
I saw it twice in theaters because I thought it was great. But I still recall to this day, and I haven't seen it since then, the entire layout of the room that they were in. I could probably draw it if I had to. I could probably draw the interior of the haberdashery that they're stuck inside of. And that kind of commitment to a singular location in a movie is very, very hard to pull off. And this movie,
I can picture the precinct in my head. Like I can kind of picture
the layout of it, right? Yeah, you can do it. And that's interesting. And it does suit itself well to a stage play. Like you could have, you could even turn it into a musical if you wanted to. You know?
Well, I've made a lot of comparisons to this movie to Evil Dead, as I was especially reading about the production stuff. And the Evil Dead musical was actually like beat for beat everything, but like for them to get the layout of the cabin on stage like that was also very impressive, and still be functional for them spraying blood onto the audience and everything.
Yeah.
And I can see like something like the set for this movie of The Precinct being made functional while still being visible for all that in a play setting.
And you could just
absolutely
move,
right. And
for the last scene, you could just at the third act, the second act, at intermission, you could almost just switch it over to the basement.
Yeah.
And just rewrite it so it all happens in the basement. Just the end of the movie is great. I really liked this conversation. I also liked. You're pretty fancy, Wilson. He's like, I have moments. and then they walk out together. And
well, no, what he says is, it would be an honor for you to walk out with me.
Right.
And then he says, I know it would.
And they kind of pat each other on the butt.
It's like a real Han Solo line, you know, like something that Han Solo would say to like a person that is freeing it.
I love you. I know.
Playfully arrogant. Yeah.
Yeah. It's, well, even the cop comes up and tries to arrest him. And he's like, no. And then the cop still tries to arrest him. He's like, leave him the fuck out of here. He just saved everybody in the goddamn precinct.
So that is the film Attack on Precinct 13. No MPAA rating game this week, so we're gonna go into our.
We can still play it and just pretend like we know what it is. Jason, just make up a number in your mind. I'm just kidding.
It's time.
I'll do that I'll do that when we have more time.
Right. It's the Jason number guessing game.
Tim, of course, just like the start, it is the I give the opportunity to the guest to go first. So when you give us your final thoughts, and if you have some sort of rating for the film Assault on Precinct 13, why don't you hit us with that?
Well, when you two first asked for me to do this particular review with you, I wanted to kind of go on a bit of a diet away from John Carpenter movies for a bit. And like not watch anything else and not watch this too ahead of time and just kind of watch it fresh because I did know it was one of his early stuff and it was one I hadn't seen in a long, long time. So I kind of wanted to keep the palette clear as I kind of walked into it to keep my thoughts as succinct as possible. And I'm happy that I did because it was really interesting to observe this as because I find the creative process to be very, very fascinating. And to watch and learn about creative people in their early projects and to see something where they have like a creative voice so well realized that like even though I made my comments about this is a bit of a raw time for John Carpenter, that there's still a few things to be developed, like it's and like this is just out of film school for him from USC and where a lot of the people involved in the production went to school with him, and to hear and read up on some of the stuff where like for like the sound, for the music and the sound design, they admit that they were using outdated technology to make this movie, and to do it in 1976 to such effect where it still looks really good, and you're so well informed of what's going on, not just as we mentioned so much with the characters, but as we were just talking about with the sets and whatnot, that we have a three-dimensional scape in our mind of what's going on here and how they're navigating around it, and we're kind of there. So to accomplish all that in 1976 in less than $100,000, like that alone gives this movie notoriety for me. So I'm very happy, and thank you both very much for bringing me back again for this. It's always fun, and it was really fun to watch this movie again. And it's given me a bit of added appreciation for John Carpenter movies in general across the spectrum of them. And as far as my rating goes, I'll give it. I'm not going to give it a chicken night in Turkey. I'm going to give it a turkey night in Turkey. It achieves what it sets out to do.
Fantastic, thank you.
They're like, we figured that out. It's a turkey.
All right, Steve, hit us with your final thoughts for the film Assault on Precinct 13.
All right. It's not at the top of my list of Carpenter movies. It's not at the bottom of my list of Carpenter movies, but it's right in the middle, I think. It's one of the ones that does show just how much control he has over making his movies feel like his movies. It feels like a John Carpenter movie no matter what you say. At the end of the day, you're looking at it and you're like, visually, beat-wise, the dialogue between characters, everything. It feels like John Carpenter. And that's all you really want when you watch a John Carpenter movie. And sometimes you'll get more than that, right? You'll get something where there's magic involved or aliens involved, and you're like, the mysticism of your mind takes over, and you're more intrigued than just the filmmaker. But I think, unfortunately for me, I don't look past that very far because we don't get much of it. But there is still something there, right? Like we have this band of villains that we never really understand. And I'd like to know a little bit more. And I think that that's where Prince of Darkness came from and where Mouth of Madness came from, where he's like, I want to have the villains be more interesting than just ghosts that exist around you. It's a zombie movie, yes, but imagine they had something more to them. Imagine there was an amulet. What if they found an amulet or some shit? That would be cool.
Or green goo.
Yeah, green goo, all that. But the movie is not about that. It's about the people at the end of the movie, the three people standing together, and like John Carpenter has always been pretty good about making sure that representation matters, I guess, but like at the same time, not like swashing people, and it's nice. I think that like you would look at this movie and like nowadays people would be like, the movie's woke, and I'm like, no, it's just a movie. It's just a movie where everyone's represented equally on screen, and like you should probably appreciate it for what it is. And I like that as well. If I had to give this movie a rating, I would give it a District 9 out of a Precinct 13 out of a labeled 14. That's what I would give it.
Thank you, Steve. Man, I couldn't believe it when they were like Precinct 9. I was like, anyway. I liked it. It didn't feel like a stuffy 70s movie and had a great story arc. I would say it was a little longer winded for what I think could have been, like, you could have made a really good short out of this, like you know what I mean? Like a really cool, really sleek. Obviously it works better as a film after we've dialed down into everything, but I think this could have been a cool short. I enjoyed the characters, and you can't really make less than a 90-minute feature and include like a lot of characters. It would have to basically be just the three survivors in a short. That's sort of a weird tangent I just went on. Doesn't matter. Don't focus on that. Focus on the fact that I like the movie. I love the innovation of John Carpenter here. That would be expanded upon in his next movies. The score and main theme were good to create tension and emotion. It does get a little slow at times, and this is an issue pacing-wise, but the story has to be told this way because it all takes place in 4 hours. And it all takes place in the first half of the movie. The second half of the movie is literally an assault on a precinct. So it goes from being like a story.
Are you telling me that the movie Assault on Precinct 13 has an assault on a precinct?
It goes from being a character exploration to suddenly being like kind of an action thriller. So that was neat. Thank you guys also for enlightening me and the stuff I was reading about it being sort of a new take on a Western, because Westerns were like all the rage during this era. But also movies like, Dirty Harry and Bronson, right? Like movies like Revenge Flight.
Bronson.
Whatever.
You mean the Death Wish series?
Yeah. With Bronson.
Death Wish is a whole other level. We should do Death Wish at some point. Yeah.
I give it a 3.2 out of 5.
What the hell are you
What the
talking
hell
about
is this
over
over here?
here?
3.2 out of 5, which I think is a pretty safe rating. I might even bump it to a 3.5 after having such a great discussion about it. Mm-hmm. And I give this movie the police showing up at the final moment to save the 3 protagonists. I don't know what that means. I just wrote it down.
You should have said 3.5 protagonists because one of them has lost their mind.
One has lost their whole brain. Thank you to myself. Let's see. With that, I'm going to say our goodbyes. Just Tim, do you have anything you want to plug?
At the moment, no, but I do want to do things in the future, so perhaps later on I'll have something to say.
Okay, fantastic. You can find us on all social media across the whole internet. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Twitch. That's where you're at right now if you're watching. You can find us in the club every night, every week at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Twitch. At Hated to see this one across all social media. And I think with that, Tim, there's just one burning question that everybody has. And what question would that be?
Oh, hey, did you see this one?
You have to keep in mind that being a director doesn't mean that you're making what you want to make. More often than not, as a director, you're an employee working for the producer, and you're doing what they want in your style as they see fit. I think over time, he became cynical because he was being forced to make bigger movies with a larger budget, but not a budget large enough to make the movie that people wanted him to make, because he did so well with lower budgets, with like Escape from New York. I think if you want a John Carpenter film to be successful, give him the minimal amount of money that he needs to tell the story that he wants, that he's happy with, and give it a wider release. The people are there to pay for it, and they will go watch it. Like, there are so many fans of his early stuff. It's as his budgets expanded, as the expectations grew to be blockbusters, to be crazy action films. He's not an action director. He's a drama, he's a horror director. So when you're expecting multi-million-dollar box office results from somebody who's not specialized in doing what you're expecting them to draw, what do you think is going to happen? Just let him do what he's good at, give it a wider release. In the end, it's going to be cheaper, and you're going to see a bigger profit off of it.
I think that he also sort of became disillusioned by the fact that, you know, he's very creative. He has a good understanding of how to like put a person on screen, and is responsible for several people becoming really famous in their careers. But he also was met with people having been so impacted by his own movies that people started making John Carpenter movies that were better than John Carpenter movies that he could make. And like he would see movies that reminded him so much of his own movies that he was like, I think that there is a younger generation now that are making the same things that I would like to make, but they're making it better.
One of those people.
He's watching his craft be perfected by people that were inspired by him, which, you know, probably feels.
Think he's happy about that, and he can like sit back.
Well, I was gonna say it's probably like a double-edged sword, where he's probably happy about the fact that he's influenced people to make something that he would love to make, but seeing them make it better than him is like, well, I'm not needed here anymore. Like, my job is done. Like, I've seen what I would want to make and how I'd want to make it being made better than maybe I could have made it.
That's
and,
an amazing point I never considered. Yeah.
And it's kind of sad, but at the same time, it's like kind of nice, you know. Like it means that, you know, he has like a nice lush career. He made what, like 19, 20 movies, something like that, and each and every one of them has clearly inspired somebody, because you can almost pinpoint a singular moment in any one of his movies that has been either homaged or completely ripped off or like redone in a loving way, and like that's pretty fucking cool. Hey, do you guys want to know a really interesting fact?
Yeah.
What's that?
Homaged is not a real word.